transformed a collapsing Miami branding agency into a $200 million zero-cents tech powerhouse, only to watch it all unravel on my wedding day. And how, after the betrayal, I rose again. I grew up in a cramped Coral Gables duplex just a few miles from the ocean, but worlds away from the glamour. I was the kid always tinkering with code, the one teachers called intense. My mom, Maria, was my biggest cheerleader. When she passed from leukemia when I was 15, I lost my compass, but not her belief in me. By then, she'd been married for 3 years to Gerald Whitman, founder of Whitman Creative, a once promising agency now stuck selling stale ad campaigns to local banks and car dealerships. Gerald adored his daughter Sienna, my stepsister, who collected failed business ventures like seashells. She was the golden child, I was the ghost. At 24, with a Stanford master's in computer science, I returned to Florida, not for sentiment but for a challenge. Whitman Creative was gasping for relevance in a digital-first world, and I had a solution. I'd been developing an AI-driven campaign engine capable of real-time consumer behavior analysis. It could read patterns, predict shifts, and automate strategy across platforms. For 2 years, I barely slept. My code restructured the company from the inside out. Suddenly, we weren't just surviving, we were thriving. Major companies like Delta and Adidas were calling. By 32, I'd scaled Whitman Creative to a $200 million zero-cents valuation. But Gerald still saw me as Maria's orphaned daughter, not the architect of his firm's rebirth. Meanwhile, Sienna floated from brand consulting gigs to hosting lifestyle podcasts no one listened to. My fiancé Miles, a structural engineer with a quiet soul, kept me sane. We planned a small, elegant wedding overlooking Biscayne Bay. For once, I allowed myself to exhale, to believe in stillness, in celebration. I should have known better. The ceremony was luminous, string lights shimmered across the water. For the first time, I felt seen, not for what I built, but for who I was. Then Gerald rose for a toast. I expected the usual performative gratitude, but instead, he said, "Today isn't just about Camille and Miles. It's about the future of Whitman Creative. I'm proud to announce our new CEO, Sienna." Laughter died mid-breath. Cutlery froze mid-air. Sienna stood, preening. She hadn't been in a single board meeting. I waited for a laugh, a wink, a just kidding. None came. Gerald walked toward me. He reached into his pocket and shoved something into my hand. A crumpled $20 zero-cents bill. "This is what you're worth, Camille," he said, his voice deliberately loud. I stood there, bouquet trembling, a room full of witnesses staring. But inside me, something harder than heartbreak clicked into place. Sienna's laugh pierced the air, sharp, smug, and meant to humiliate. Every head turned toward me. Some looked away out of pity, others just stared. My chest burned, but I refused to crack. I calmly folded the crumpled bill, slid it into my pearl clutch, and met Gerald's eyes with a cool smile. "Thank you," I said evenly. "This means a lot." Then I turned to Miles, squeezed his hand, and walked us back to our table, ignoring the murmurs trailing us like shadows. Inside, I was shattering. But I wouldn't give them the pleasure of watching me fall apart. That night, when the last guest left and the candles flickered low, I changed out of my wedding dress and sat in my study. Miles was asleep in the other room, the echo of vows still warm in the air. I opened my clutch. The $20 zero-cents bill was still there. Creased, meaningless to Gerald, but seared into my memory like a brand. I stared at my screen, not out of shock, but purpose. They'd underestimated me, and they would regret it. For years, I'd protected Whitman Creative, but more importantly, I'd protected myself. Every major contract, Delta, Adidas, Carnival Cruises, was personally tied to me. Each agreement included a clause. If I exited leadership, they could walk away, no strings attached. The AI platform? That revolutionary tech that built our empire? It wasn't theirs, it was mine, built under Everwave Systems, my own private company, quietly registered in Delaware. Whitman Creative only had a licensing agreement, and tonight, I revoked it. I opened my laptop, my hands were steady. By midnight, I had emailed our top 20 clients. I cited their contract clauses, formally announcing my departure and their option to terminate. Attached, my resignation letter, signed and final. At 1:00 a.m., I logged into Everwave's cloud server and shut down all Whitman Creative access. I didn't need revenge. Not yet. This was about justice and freedom. By 3:00 a.m., the replies began pouring in. 17 of the 20 responded by dawn. They were leaving. At 9:00 a.m., I walked into Whitman Creative's Miami office tower. My heels echoed like thunder on the marble floor. Eyes followed me, tense, confused. In my hands, a tablet containing 3 files. My formal resignation, signed termination notices from our biggest clients, and proof that Everwave owned the AI platform Gerald had taken for granted. They thought they were rid of me. They didn't know they had just declared war with the wrong woman. I pushed open the executive boardroom doors. The tension inside was thick, electric. Sienna was pacing, her glossy curls now frizzed at the edges, mascara smudged from stress. She spun around and shoved her phone toward me. "It's from Carnival," she hissed. "Contract terminated. What the hell did you do, Camille?" I tilted my head, calm. "Just the beginning." Gerald stepped forward. His usual swagger, ironed into every inch of his designer suit, was gone. "Camille, let's talk this through," he said, voice lower, gentler than I'd ever heard it. Without a word, I tapped my tablet. First, I displayed my signed resignation letter, effective immediately. Then came the termination clauses, each one linked to departing clients. And last, the blow that landed hardest. The proof that Everwave Systems owned the AI platform. The license, officially revoked at 5:00 a.m. "You wanted me gone," I said, voice even. "Now you've got it." Silence. Not just in the room, but in their bones. They were watching their empire bleed out in real time. I turned and walked toward the door. Sienna scrambled after me, heels clicking, voice shrill. "You can't do this, Camille. You can't just walk away." Behind her, Gerald followed, his face drawn, eyes darting, sweat shining beneath his collar. Around us, the open concept office buzzed with rising confusion. Employees reading emails, murmuring in huddles, faces pale. Then Thomas, the CFO, emerged from the crowd like a man arriving at a crash site. "Gerald," he said, holding up his phone, "we've got a problem. Multiple investors just pulled funding, and half the dev teams resigned." He turned to me, eyes wide with realization. Without her platform, we're dead in the water. I stood still. Let the weight of that truth hang. Sienna's voice cracked. "Fix this, Camille. You owe us." I nearly laughed. "Owe you?" I said, stepping closer. "After I built the thing you gutted? After Gerald handed me $20 on my wedding day and called it a send-off?" She flinched. Gerald's mouth opened, but no words came. "You took everything I'd built in one night," I continued. "All I did was take it back, Sienna." Gerald stepped forward again. "We can work this out. Your family." That word stung, meant nothing now. I thought of my mother, her unwavering belief, her quiet strength, and felt peace settle in my chest. "You made your choice," I said, walking away. "Now live with it." As the elevator doors opened, I caught Sienna's sharp gasp, Gerald's silence frozen in place. The glass closed behind me, and for the first time in years, I felt free. By noon, Miami's tech scene was in meltdown. Headlines exploded across news feeds. Whitman Creative loses major clients overnight. AI platform ownership sparks collapse. The firm's stock nosedived. Analysts speculated, Twitter roared. But me? I just closed my laptop and opened a new chapter. If you've been holding your breath with Camille, don't exhale just yet. What she does next will silence a city. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of her rise. because this story is far from over. I didn't linger on it. By the following week, I was in my new office, a glass-walled suite in downtown Miami's Brickell district, launching Everwave systems. The space smelled of fresh paint, new ambition, and liberation. My core team, developers, engineers, and 2 executives who'd walked out of Whitman Creative with me, were already busy connecting servers, setting up infrastructure, finalizing contracts. Delta and Adidas, loyal to me, not the Whitman name, had already inked new deals. By 2:00 p.m., we'd secured over $50 million, 0 cents in new commitments, nearly a third of Whitman Creative's former portfolio. I sipped a cortado by the window, watching Whitman Creative's stock tumble across my monitor. What I felt wasn't joy. It was clarity. Years spent trying to earn Gerald's respect, carrying Sienna's dead weight, had taught me one brutal lesson. My worth was never theirs to define. My phone buzzed. It was Miles. "You okay, Camille?" I smiled. I could hear the concern under his steady tone. "Better than okay," I said. Everwave isn't just a company. It's mine. Built the right way, with the right people. My team erupted into cheers in the next room. Our first press release had just gone live. I glanced at the small glass frame on my desk, where I'd pressed that same $20, 0 cents bill, beneath a quote from my mother. "They don't have to see your worth. Just don't forget it." Whitman Creative was in free fall. I was building, and the industry was starting to notice. 2 days later, a text came from Sienna. "Camille, please. Meet me. One conversation. Please." I stared at it for a long time. Her sudden humility was almost surreal after years of smug condescension. Still, I agreed. Not out of pity, but curiosity. We met at a quiet cafe in Coconut Grove, far from tech towers or industry whispers. Sienna looked different. No designer labels, just jeans, a plain sweater, and under-eye circles that no concealer could cover. I took my seat opposite her, stirring honey into my tea. "I didn't know," she said softly, voice brittle. "About the contracts, the software, any of it. Dad thought you'd never leave." I didn't speak. I just listened. "Whitman Creative's collapsing," she said. "The clients are gone, the tech's useless. Dad's not the same." She leaned forward. "We need you back." Her plea brought back flashes. Mom's funeral, where she didn't even look my way. Family dinners where Gerald praised her podcast while ignoring the code that saved his company. I leaned forward too. "On my wedding day," I said quietly, "when your father handed you my company and gave me $20. Did you think it was wrong?" She looked down. I didn't think. "I know," I said. "That's the problem. You never did." Her voice cracked. "Please, for family." That word again. Hollow, misused. I rose, slipped my bag over my shoulder. "You wanted to be CEO, Sienna," I said. "Figure it out." I walked away. No anger, no triumph, just peace. And in that stillness, I could hear my mother's voice again. "You were always enough." And for the first time, I believed it. Over the next 2 weeks, Whitman Creative unraveled like cheap thread. Investors bolted. Employees resigned in waves. Their last-ditch effort to launch a substitute software platform failed spectacularly. Clunky, buggy, and laughably outdated. It wasn't Everwave's AI, not even close. The board voted Gerald out as chairman. Sienna stepped down as CEO days later. By the end of the month, Whitman Creative filed for bankruptcy. In tech forums and blogs, its name became shorthand for what happens when ego overshadows innovation. Meanwhile, Everwave soared. We signed new contracts with Nike and Microsoft, pushing our valuation past $600 million, 0 cents in just 3 months. My team, those coders, engineers, and strategists who'd followed me not out of obligation but belief, worked with a passion I'd never witnessed at Whitman. Miami's startup scene hailed me as a rising force. Headlines called me a visionary. But I didn't care about the headlines. I cared about building something real. Miles and I hosted a modest dinner for the team at our apartment in Edgewater, laughter spilling through open windows as sailboats drifted, across Biscayne Bay. After everyone left, I sat alone on our balcony, a glass of Merlot in hand, the Miami skyline glowing against the water. I thought of Mom, how she used to read me bedtime stories about dreamers, people who built their own kingdoms with bare hands and big hearts. I had done that. Not for Gerald, not for Sienna, for me. The pain from their betrayal had faded to a faint scar, something I could touch, but that no longer defined me. Everwave wasn't just a company. It was proof I never needed their permission to shine. As I set my wine glass down, my phone buzzed. Another article. Camille Foster redefines Miami tech. I smiled, then turned it off. I didn't need the noise. The future was mine. A month later, I received an email from the University of Miami's School of Engineering inviting me to deliver the keynote at their annual Innovation Summit. The theme? Overlooked Innovators. I couldn't help but smirk. Years ago, Sienna had been their darling. Her short-lived podcast and curated Instagram feed celebrated like gospel. Now, they wanted my story. I accepted. The auditorium was packed. Hundreds of bright-eyed students filled the rows, nerves and ambition written across their faces. Standing at the podium, I didn't sanitize it. I told them the truth. About coding through nights. About Gerald's betrayal. About the $20 0-cent bill that mocked me on my wedding day. I told them how I left it all, built Everwave, and turned a stolen future into a self-made one. When you're underestimated, I told them, use it. Let it sharpen you, not shatter you. The room was silent. Focused. I saw heads nodding, pens scribbling furiously. A student raised her hand. What kept you going? I paused, thought of my mother's hand in mine. Her whisper, you are enough. Believing in myself, I said, even when no one else did. And learning to stop trying to prove it to the wrong people. Afterward, a young woman approached, laptop stickered, nerves jittering through her fingers. Your story's mine, she said. I'm going to keep going. I smiled, handed her my card. Driving home, I felt lighter. I wasn't just building a company. I was lighting a path. The way Mom once did for me. That night, a letter arrived. The envelope was old school, handwritten. Gerald's name on the return address. His once bold handwriting looked frail now. I didn't open it. Instead, I tucked it into the drawer where I'd kept the $20 0-cent bill. That bill had once been a wound, a reminder of humiliation and betrayal. Now it was just paper. I pulled out my scrapbook. Inside were photos from every step. My first laptop, a coffee-stained notebook from grad school, the day we launched Everwave, our rooftop celebration. I slipped the $20 0-cent bill into a sleeve beside a picture of Miles and me, laughing over pizza on our first date. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about remembering where I began and how far I'd come. Sitting with Miles on our couch, the skyline twinkling beyond our windows, I felt something stronger than success. I felt peace. I'd built a $600 million 0-cent empire, not to prove Gerald wrong, but to prove Mom right. Her belief in me carried me through betrayal, through burnout, through being unseen. Now, I stood tall, not because I'd won, but because I'd let go. The letter, the bill, the past, they didn't own me. My future did. If you've ever been underestimated, pushed aside, or told you weren't enough, then you know a piece of my story. I'd love to hear yours. Drop a comment below. Tell me what part of this journey resonated with you. If you're building your own path like I did, let's walk it together. Subscribe, not just to follow my rise, but to stand with those of us who've had to build in silence. My advice? Stop waiting for permission. You don't need anyone's validation to begin. Just start. Because the future doesn't belong to the loudest, it belongs to the most determined.